Well, let me just begin. I wanted to share a few things with you all. This morning, I received a letter in the mail from a father who was really frightened after learning that his wife and 2 young daughters were involved in a serious car crash. This was in early April. Officer Pierre Dolcine of the Northeast District Patrol responded to a very serious accident at the intersection of Lock Raven Boulevard and Northern Parkway. And you know how busy that section is. 2 of the 3 individuals in one of the cars were sisters, 3-year-old Elizabeth and 9-month-old Catherine. February, fortunately they did not suffer very serious injuries, but they were very afraid, and understandably so were their parents. Their vehicle had actually crashed into a lamppost and then a tree. As the father of these young girls, Mr. Dawson Noley, noted, Officer Dolcine appeared and was exactly what we needed and infinitely more than we could have ever hoped for. Mr. Noley went on to say that Officer Dolcine was sincere, genuine, and present. He had his daughter smiling soon after this horrific crash. He got her excited about riding with the EMS to the hospital, and Officer Dolcine had to stay at the scene of the crash while the family headed to the hospital. Mr. Noley then described how after hours of not eating, his 3-year-old daughter was becoming a bit restless. At that moment, Officer Dolcine appears again, and with a smile on his face, he presented her with a stuffed bunny rabbit. He also took her out to his patrol car and let her see the lights and hear the siren. He later checked on Mrs. Noley's wife before he returned to duty. Officer Dolcine, we applaud you, and we also thank you for representing our city so well. It should also be noted that we are in the midst of National Police Week. Stop by and visit a memorial to officers on President Street near the Shot Tower. We know and we hear the stories often across this nation of police officers being killed on duty. And I said this at the memorial on Sunday evening, that when our police officers leave their homes, whether their families are physically leaving the door, their hearts are leaving the door with them. Because many of them don't know. They're hopeful that they do come back home. And I also started doing my rounds with the police at the various police stations, and I said to them that we know that even though we're under a consent decree, that the majority of our police officers come to protect and serve, and we're grateful for that. But I wanted to take a moment to say to all of our first responders, thank you for your sacrifice. And to you, Officer Dolcine, thank you so much. And so today we're presenting you with the illustrious certificate of recognition that you too can earn. No. This is for you.
Thanks.
And also for your exceptional service beyond and above the call of duty. We thank you. It was really a very nice letter that we received for the family. And it's always good to hear from folks who appreciate the work that our police officers, our first responders do on behalf of the citizens of Baltimore. Would you like to say a few words? These are commandos over here. I saw them at the Board of Veterans meeting. I was like, hey. Hi.
First of all, doing this job has just been just comes from the heart. It's not what I do, it's how I do it. And that's in all thanks to my commanders and chief. Thank you.
More good news. More good news.
Did we get the officers?
Yes. Yeah, Officer Dolcine.
It's D-O-L-C-I-N-E.
D-O-L-C-I.
Pierre, P-I-E-R-R-E.
I'm sorry, say that again, sir, your first name?
Pierre, P-I-E-R-R-E. Last name is D-O-L-C-I-N-E. It's French.
It's French.
So you want to tell us about your DNA? No, I'm only joking.
Yes, sir.
Officer, when you got to the scene, what did you see and why did you react the way you did?
What? Thank you. Well, like Ms. Nolly stated, it was a horrific scene. And going on calls like that is, to me, it's about who's the people that's involved in the accident. So I saw the two young ladies practically, also crying. So I just wanted to have them focus on me and not worry about what's going on around them. And once they focus on me, then everything else is minor.
Any other questions?
When was the accident?
Pardon me, ma'am?
When was the accident?
I don't remember. I can't
I think
remember.
It was April. It was in April, let me think. I have the date there. So we just received this letter. It says April, doesn't say the exact date.
We'll get the exact info.
Okay. Is the certificate of service and recognition something new for you Mayor,
To receive
do
one?
this kind of
Oh, for me?
Yes.
I was just so, to get a letter from a citizen, to say that, it was his attitude, it was how he handled the situation, it's how he calmed down my daughters. I just thought it deserved a recognition. And just a reminder to the public that we have police officers on our force that care about our communities and who, want to make sure that we're safe. And in this case, wanted to make sure that the entire family was safe. And as he said, I just wanted them to focus on me. That would reduce the tears and not let them really recognize the severity of the situation. And so I thought that was worthy of one of our great medals.
So I think the words that you used were sincere, genuine, and pleasant. I don't know if you were quoting from the letter, but I mean, is the bar that low that counts as beyond, the scope?
No, the fact that a citizen writes a letter, you don't, people go through everyday life and they don't say anything. When things are good, nobody says anything. When things are bad, you hear big voices. And oftentimes you don't hear anything. But to have somebody sit down and actually write a letter, not text it, not an email, but actually write a letter, to me, it's not about setting the bar low. It's about citizens thinking highly of our police department and of each other, and thought that it was worthy themselves to pick up a pen, put a pen to paper. I thought was worthy. We set high bars all the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
And speaking of high bars, I think, so who's your favorite teacher? Who is your favorite teacher? You don't, you never had a favorite teacher? I remember Mr. Pugh, my 5th grade teacher. I remember Mr. Jones, my 6th grade teacher. I remember Dr. Sermanian, who was my economics professor, who used to say, you're really smart. If you could just stop entertaining people outside of the classroom and come in. So I had a lot of great teachers. And I know that there are young people in our city who think about, their best teachers. Anybody else have a good teacher? Who was your best teacher?
Mr. Zabilski, back in high school.
Jane? 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 Jane?
My first grade teacher.
Really?
Her name is Dorothy Decker.
Darn.
There's Miss Marie, my elementary PE teacher, and Miss Keller, my high
Has
school.
your physical education
My
teacher?
physical education teacher,
Okay.
and Miss Keller, my high school journalism teacher.
Wow, great.
Miss Young, what was her first name? Cindy Young. She was my AP English teacher in 12th grade.
Great. See how teachers are so remembered? Well, what I wanted to share with you all today is that our city school system every year celebrates what we call the Teacher of the Year. And this is a real competitive process that includes applications, essays, and recommendations, followed by interviews and classroom observations as it relates to coming up with the finalists. The candidates pool is narrowed until one teacher is surprised by district leaders. I wish we had that video. In the classroom, you have it.
I did.
Share with them. With the announcement, the winner. The winner for this school year is Justin Holbrook of Roland Park Elementary School. Mr. Holbrook has been a teacher since 2010. He holds a bachelor's degree in elementary education from our own Goucher College, and he will receive a master's degree in educational leadership from our own Loyola University of Maryland later this month. And so, Mr. Holbrook, our 2016 Teacher of the Year finalist, his teaching excellence has also been recognized by other institutions and organizations. He is featured recently and aired nationally on a documentary called Gray Matters about teachers and their work with the Bryan Targeted Teaching Framework. He was nominated for the Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching. Nobody said math teacher, I said economics.
You didn't ask me.
Oh, oh, this is so bad. I should have asked the CPA. So who was your favorite?
Miss Inez Johnson in 5th grade. She
Okay.
was really good.
Math?
Math,
All
yeah.
right, there you go. And he was recognized in February by the Maryland State Department of Education for leadership and instruction in gifted education. As City School Teacher of the Year, Mr. Holbrook will receive a cash award and classroom supplies provided through the Mayor Kurt L. Schmoke Endowment Fund at the Fund for Educational Excellence. We will also throw oh, you get to throw out the pitch.
Yeah.
Now, I can give you a few tips. He's going to do this on June the 6th. You know, you got to hold the ball like that. Like that. And then you step. You know, you got to step. And more importantly, you got to get it across the plate. Okay. And don't let anybody tell you got to step, you know, because they were telling me, move forward, move forward. I was like, no, I can get this ball across the plate. Anyway, share a few words with us. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mayor Pugh, for the kind words and inviting me here today. I'd also like to thank CEO Dr. Santalisas and Baltimore City Schools for this tremendous honor. Shout out to my 4th grade students who are in math class right now back at Rowan Park, and also my principal, Nick D'Ambrosio, for being here today and his continuous support. Being a professional educator is the best profession, in my opinion, because we have the opportunity every single day to construct memorable experiences and directly impact the communities that we serve. Every single student in this district matters, and every one of them has a story that matters. It's then our job as educators to create the environments for our students to develop the voice necessary to then share their stories to the world. I'm humbled by the recognition of City Schools Teacher of the Year because I recognize the countless number of educators we have in our district that are incredible. However, through empowering the stories of our staff and students, we'll be able to continue to make Baltimore a great place. Our students and staff, I believe, are the future of our city, and I think that our future here in Baltimore is bright. So thank you very much.
So another one of those certificates of recognition. I'd love to present this to you, Justin, on behalf of the citizens of Baltimore. And another one of those powerful medals. Thank you for your contribution to our students.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, you can give me their little boxes. You can give them their little boxes. So, how's everybody? Good. Any questions for me?
I was just listening on, I think it was NPR this morning, that 100 mayors or so have signed a letter to the Trump administration about Planned Parenthood funding. Have you been part of that?
Have not been approached. What happened? I wonder, yeah, you know what, I need to check, Jane, because that may have happened at the U.S. Conference of Mayors meeting, and I know there was some discussion, so let me just check and make sure.
I would assume you would like to
Oh,
know.
yes, I may be on that level.
Any other questions? Are you meeting tomorrow with the police commissioner and the state's attorney? Is that?
Yeah, I've actually I met with the police commissioner on Sunday, spent a couple hours talking with them about the problem that we're facing in our city around crime and violence, and the need for us to really take control of our streets and our corners, to be more visible in our neighborhoods. We were also talking about new technology and things that we can look at, or are there things that we're missing? And so, yeah, I look forward to further discussion. I've already begun the discussions with our state's attorney, and we were talking about making sure that we've inventoried all the programs that are available for our young people this summer. The other thing that concerns me, and why I'm going to be having a conversation with our CEO of the school system, is that we know that there's a percentage of our young people who are going to go to college, so they'll be preparing this summer to go to college. We also know that there are 12,500 young people who've applied to work, and we're pretty much close to being able to fund all of those positions. And then there's another percentage of young people who will be going to work immediately upon graduation. Among the concerns I have are those who don't have anything, aren't going to college, don't have a job. And so what is it that, how are we tracking these individuals, and how are we making sure that their lives get off to a good start? And so we're working on that, hope to have a solution to that. It's part of my strategic plan and call to action in terms of how we're tracking young people and making sure that we're keeping them busy so that the streets don't keep them busy.
That's one of the topics tomorrow night, or tomorrow in this meeting.
Part of the conversation.
It feels like you quite clearly articulated like a vision for how you want to attack some of the sort of social problems, for want of a better word, but it also feels like we're in the midst of a crisis with, more than 120 people being killed already this year. Do you feel like you have a handle on what you can do in the immediate short term, if it is with the police department, with anybody else, to try and get that?
Well, I don't know that if you're aware that we brought in the ATF. We've got some technology here as it relates to dealing with the gun violence that's in the street. We also have the DEA. I got to make sure I get these acronyms correct. The DEA here working with the police department. And I do feel that we're getting a handle on it. But I do recognize that yesterday I was having lunch with the mayor of DC and talking about, the crime sprees, how it's gone up and gone down in her city as well. So we talked about some technology that I'd like to explore and with the police commissioner, and she's sending us some additional information on that. We're also talking with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, with the other mayors around the country. I was just with 5 other mayors most recently, talking about how they're dealing with gun violence in their cities. There's just an enormous amount of guns floating through our country. It's not just Baltimore, it's other cities around the nation. And you can't just compare Baltimore by size, as I saw someone do on the news, to a Midwestern city. You got to look at urban environments around the country where gun violence is at its all-time high, and opioid addiction is as well. I mean, you just saw recently on one of our campuses where, young people involved in opioid addiction. So this is not just, this is not systemic of any one neighborhood or any one community or one group of people. This is a problem that this nation is having. And when Governor Hogan declared Maryland in a state of emergency because of opioid addiction, hopefully what happens with that is that we begin to see real solutions around the problem, and we get more hands on deck focusing on how we do this. You got people trading guns for drugs, drugs for guns. And so we've got to figure out how do we detect guns on our streets in a better way. The laws have changed. You can't just walk up to a corner and just tell people to disperse. In fact, you got to walk around them. But what I've said is that we still can own our corners in our neighborhoods and our communities. We are brightening up the city, adding more lights. We started adding lights on Pennsylvania Avenue and on Charles Street, and I've said that the lights aren't bright enough in certain areas yet, and so we're still working on that.
So do you think that some of the reforms and maybe the less sort of intervention of policing on the corners is leading to the higher violence?
I don't have the answer to the high violence. We're searching for answers to how do we reduce the violence in our city. We know that there are too many guns on our streets. It's not just here. It's all across the country in many urban cities. We know that we've got to do a better job of trying to get the guns off the streets. We recently learned some months ago that a locker had 60 guns in it, and Those guns are somewhere on some city street somewhere. We saw this morning in Baltimore County where a guy was stopped, handcuffed, because they detected a gun in his car, and he's somewhere in the area with a gun. I don't know if it's loaded, but with a gun. So there's just too many guns on our streets.
How do you get the guns off the streets?
We're looking for solutions. There've been things like gun buybacks. They're talking about this bail thing.
How do you feel for the guns for bail measures that Councilman Scott wants to put in place?
I haven't totally reviewed it. We need to get guns off our streets. But it's, again, they're being used as tools to get drugs, and people are taking a whole different attitude to violence. I mean, I remember when people would, fight in the street. It's a fist fight. Today it's a gunshot. The violence that are happening in people's homes, domestic violence. There was a time when it was an argument or a conversation. Now it's a gunshot. So guns are readily available, throughout our nation, and we've done some things legislatively to strengthen those gun laws. The commissioner and I went to Annapolis this session to strengthen them more. That legislation didn't pass. And so the other conversation has to be with our judges. We're looking at some of the folks who were involved in criminal activity, and I heard someone, well, they haven't been involved in 3 years, or they haven't been involved in 5 years. But we've got to do a better job of tracking folks and holding them accountable for the violence that they perpetrated or are perpetrating in our communities. It can't just be a slap on the hand and back to the streets. And I think that the court system needs to take a very close look at how they're returning violent offenders back to our streets.
What are you working on in terms of funding for the Safe Streets program?
Well, first of all, we're looking at what is going to be left over from this year's budget. I've got some conversations going on today with some of our universities who wanted to help us out, but I'm asking them to scrub the budget so that we can make sure that Safe Streets has what it needs.
Madam Mayor, what is the status of the negotiations between the city and the police union?
That's a good question. In negotiations.
Still smiling?
I'm still smiling.
Madam Mayor, the Preakness is coming up next weekend, and I know that I've asked you about this a couple of times, but has any more conversations taken place between the city and the Stoner Group, even in the past 2 weeks or so, about the future of Pimlico?
So I had a conversation just recently with the Stadium Authority, because there's a second part to the study.
Right.
The second part of the study is supposed to show us how we should be looking at funding for Pimlico Racetrack. Again, the meeting that I did have with the vice president of the company was very positive. I think the initial report was positive in the sense that, the Preakness is growing in Baltimore, grew last year in the mud. I know it's going to be beautiful this year with the weather that is anticipated. So we're waiting for the second part of the study to be completed.
So basically, you don't think that any conversations about potential funding sources will happen until that second phase comes out?
Oh, I think we'll have conversations before then.
Okay.
Yeah. I just want to prepare people to enjoy the Preakness in the next, 9 days? Were we 9 days out?
Yeah.
9 days out, where I call it our Super Bowl every year in Baltimore occurs. It's going to be a beautiful day. We're going to be welcoming hundreds of thousands of people to our city. Over 100 and almost 140,000 people attended last year, so we're looking forward to the numbers to continue to grow.
But to your knowledge, there's been no conversations taking place yet about funding?
No, other than the conversation that I had here.
Okay.
Mhm.
Madam Mayor, this is a question I think you and Mr. Ralph can answer. There was a settlement approved today involving a police detective that was accused of lying, and as a result of this possible lying, someone may have been put in prison for a good long time. I mean, when you were reading through this case, the settlement, I mean, what concerns did you have? Why did you approve the settlement?
Okay. And can you let them know when that occurred?
When the
Yeah.
yes. So, first of all, you know, this occurred between May 2012 and March of 2014. You said they were accused of lying. It wasn't so much they were accused of lying. Of course, the plaintiff asserts that there were misstatements, and those misstatements didn't support probable cause in the case. Certainly, there were issues, inconsistencies. I would not say that this officer was lying. In fact, there's evidence that actually supports the officer's actions and statements, but there were mistakes. And because of those mistakes, there were questions at a suppression hearing in March of 2014. And based on those, this complaint arose out of that. When we look at these cases, we just don't look at what's absolutely right or who's absolutely wrong. We look at potential risks for the city and exposure to the city when we resolve these cases. So obviously, this case has been looked at by the police department, and they have handled that investigation in terms of any wrongdoing. I will tell you that from our looking at this case, it does not look like the officer was, in fact, lying, but in fact that there were mistakes, and there is evidence that supports the officer's statements. But again, you know, if you're not exactly accurate, that can lead to problems, and which was the result of this settlement.
Can you address the settlement involving Darius Clark, the 9-year-old?
So, yeah, that's very
What year was that
unfortunate.
case?
Yeah,
What
excuse
year
me.
was that case?
The Darius,
Mhm.
not sure when.
That's he's a 9-year-old, he's the third
Yeah,
grade principal.
That's the case with the school board. I'm not sure the date of that case.
I think it was in 2015.
Okay. It's a tragic case. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. Tragedy all around. What would you like to know about that?
Well, and I remember covering this at the time, there were allegations about the handling of it internally. And what was the position of the city as it pertained to the plaintiff's lawsuit?
So the plaintiff had claims against the schools and the city. The city was dismissed out of the case. However, one of our employees, which is the community health aide, was still a defendant in the case. There were issues alleged in the case about how the supervision by the schools and of this young person, and about you know, how quickly the ambulance was called. What is important from our standpoint is what experts have told us about this very tragic and unfortunate situation, which is that unfortunately this child's injury appeared to have been fatal at the time. So nothing that happened subsequent to the unfortunate fall by this child would have changed the outcome. That being the case, still, there is a child who's no longer alive, and you have to consider the effects on the jury, and as I said, our job is to weigh the risks and exposure of the city. In these kinds of cases, we thought this was an appropriate settlement based on those injuries, and that's why the case was settled for what it was settled for.
Mr. Ralph, going back to the, excuse me, the officer settlement, you mentioned that the officer wasn't lying, but mistakes were made. What were the mistakes that were found to have been made?
Sure. So in terms of the allegation was that this was an investigation that was for some time, some months. And the officer indicated that he had run the tags of the suspect. There were some inaccuracies in the dates and times of when those tags were run. Apparently the public defender looked at one registry and presented that information at the suppression hearing in federal court. and it showed that there were no runs done in that one database. However, there are other databases, and we have looked at those databases, and there were tags run in those other databases, within minutes. So it's not exactly, again, more accuracy is always better. And unfortunately, in this case, at the time, the U.S. Attorney did not have that information. At the time, the U.S. Attorney office decided to not pursue those charges.
Guys, we're gonna have to cut this short. Any other questions?
That's one more question for Mayor.
Yes.
That,
Okay.
I did a story a couple of weeks ago, and a continuing case, the police department has now filed notice to appeal. I think you're probably aware of it, that there was an officer that was involved in an incident in 2013. Trial board found him guilty in October of 2016 of excessive force and misconduct, and the police commissioner, Kevin Davis, fired him in November. So it followed that process,
Mm-hmm.
and a circuit court judge has now overturned the firing.
Wow.
I just like, if you're aware of it enough to make any comment on it, I mean, there's a great deal of criticism that the police department doesn't hold people to account.
Mm-hmm.
And here is a case
An example
where
of where they were
did,
held
and now
accountable.
we have a court that has said, has overturned it.
So, not completely familiar with the case, so I don't really have any real comments, but let me just say this. One of the things I said earlier was about our court system. And I think that when you make these kinds of decisions, and we want people to believe in the process, that these decisions should stand, because that's what the process is. And so, again, one of the things I said earlier is that we need to have a discussion with our court system in terms of how we deal with cases involving the city, and we'll do that. Thank you all.
Thanks, Mr. Rowe.